The Republican convention is kind of sputtering along. Meanwhile, New Orleans is a little concerned. And let me take a different route into this story than the usual one. On this day, today, August 28th, 49 years ago, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King gave his most famous speech, telling 300,000 Americans who showed up for that speech, huddled together at the Lincoln Memorial here in Washington, D.C., that he had a dream. Here's a clip from it.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. Yes. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
There you go. 49 years later, today, on this day, Republicans are meeting in Tampa, Florida, to turn the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's dream back into the nightmare of inequality and segregation that he had lived through. Dr. King had a dream that one day this nation would rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, of our founding words, of the stuff that's in the Declaration and the original idealistic, it wasn't played out all that well, but it was there. Our creed that all people are created equal. He had a dream that the sweltering heat of oppression would transform into an oasis of freedom and justice. He had a dream that in southern states where races held power, one day little black children and little white children would join hands as sisters and brothers. In the decades since Dr. King's speech, this nation has worked hard to make King's dream a reality and succeeded in many ways, although there's still a lot of work to do. But today, Dr. King's dream is in danger like never before. Today, we have a Republican Party that's actually trying to overturn the Voting Rights Act of 1965. A significant achievement from Dr. King's era that outlawed black voter suppression through things like poll taxes and literacy tests. We have more than a half dozen state attorneys general, all from states with a long history of denying minorities the vote, petitioning the Supreme Court to strike down the Voting Rights Act and let Republican state legislatures pass the American Legislative Exchange Council, the Koch brothers funded things, these radical voter suppression ID laws that could kick 1 in 4 African Americans off the voting rolls in November. We have a Republican Party that will rely and is relying on race baiting and dog whistle politics to question the legitimacy of our nation's first African American president. You'll hear from the birthers. You'll hear from those who refer to Obama as the food stamp president. You'll hear the word welfare used again and again and again in Karl Rove's advertisements. And you'll hear calls for states' rights, that code phrase used to justify decades of racism and oppression before and during King's era. But King didn't just have a dream about racial equality. The Reverend Martin Luther King had a dream about economic equality as well. He was assassinated in Memphis while supporting the striking sanitation workers' union. He told them, "You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages. I need not remind you that this is the plight of our people all over America. Now our struggle is for genuine equality, which means economic equality." And yet today, unions have been decimated. The gap between workers and CEOs is larger than ever, and wealth inequality in America is at levels unseen even before King's time. At the RNC, politicians are going to be applauded for their war on organized labor. Scott Walker's a deity in Tampa for taking on the public sector unions. Chris Christie earned a keynote speaking gig for taking on the teachers union. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's dream for economic equality is becoming a nightmare. The middle class is being destroyed. And as his dream for world peace is also being destroyed. Beyond racial and economic equality, King dreamed of peace. He said in New York City in 1967 in a speech against the Vietnam War, "The oceans of history are made turbulent by the ever-rising tides of hate. History is cluttered with the wreckage of nations and individuals that pursued this self-defeating path of hate. We still have a choice today: nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. We must move past indecision to action. We must find new ways to speak for peace in Vietnam and justice throughout the developing world, a world that borders on our doors." Still quoting here from Dr. King. "If we do not act, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridors of time, reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, and strength without sight." End of quote. Today, we're in a never-ending war on terror, promoted by those same people that you're going to hear in Tampa, Florida. In fact, the one voice in the Republican Party who aligns with Dr. King in opposition to war, Ron Paul, he's been banned from speaking at the convention. Instead, he's been replaced by people like Rick Santorum, who want even more war, who believe America's army is God's army and should bring democracy to the Middle East through drone strikes, cruise missiles, cluster bombs. You know, we're already too far down those long, dark, shameful corridors that those nations that possess power without compassion have walked in the past. Dr. King's dream of peace is a nightmare tonight in Tampa, Florida. And so on this night, nearly a half century after King talked about his dream, we should all be aware of the choice in front of us. It's a choice that, frankly, couldn't be any clearer. On one side, we have the dream or nightmare coming from the RNC, a dream that only the wealthy can be trusted, that minorities are flawed, and that endless war is destined by God. And on the other side, we have the American dream, a dream rooted in equality, economic justice, and lasting peace, a dream handed down to us by Dr. Martin Luther King, and a dream that our nation can and will achieve if we just all work at it and don't give in to the politics of division that we hear coming out of Tampa. You know, the stakes couldn't be higher. There is an actual concerted effort to destroy the middle class of America because the middle class, we are no longer useful to the international oligarchs. It is now a, Thomas Friedman, the world is flat. It is now a world run by multinational corporations that don't give a damn about individual countries or people, and they certainly don't want a middle class. There is no nation in the world that has ever built a middle class without government involvement. And the Republicans are going to be arguing for just the opposite. You just watch.